My father laid out. Business, ambition, appearance. I chose to live far away, with little but in peace. And so, I was erased. Little by little, until there was no more room for me in that house, or in that will. But I went to the wake anyway. Maybe out of respect, maybe out of weakness, maybe just to confirm that he was truly gone. Beside the casket, my mother wept quietly, but her eyes, cold as stone, didn't meet my gaze. My older brother, Enrique, clasped hands as if it were a celebration. The youngest, Isabella, paraded in black as if expecting applause for her outfit, and I was there with just my presence, something that was always insufficient for them. When the family lawyer, a gentleman in a sober suit and tired eyes, approached to announce that the will reading would take place in a few minutes, all eyes turned to him. Everyone seemed to know what they were getting. Except me. I wasn't invited. I only learned about the wake through a cold message from my mother's secretary. But even without an invitation, I went. Something inside me told me I needed to be there. Not for inheritance. I never had hope for that, but for closure, for myself. The reading room was small and stuffy. Everyone sat around a large wooden table, like a scene from a movie. My name was ignored in the looks and words. No hello, no wave. And when the lawyer began to speak, the world seemed to slow down. The reading began with formalities until the names were mentioned. Enrique got the beach house, the investments, the offshore account. Isabella inherited the family jewels, 2 companies, and a penthouse in Sao Paulo. Even my mother benefited from properties and lifetime income. And then, silence. The lawyer paused. No mention of my name, no penny, no letter. Enrique looked at me with a half smile as if to say, "I told you so." Isabella just crossed her arms, bored. My mother, she just looked away, as if everything was perfectly fine. In that moment, I confirmed what I'd always known. I wasn't part of the family. I never was. I was just there to see, with my own eyes, how disposable I was. But before the lawyer could finish reading, he cleared his throat. He removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase and, with a strange expression on his face, said, "There is a confidential attachment left by Mr. Alberto during his lifetime, with specific instructions, and this envelope is for Mr. Daniel." And then, for a brief moment, the silence turned to shock. When I heard the lawyer say my name in that room, it was as if for a second the world stopped. But before I opened the envelope, my mind took me back, as it often does when the body feels like it's about to collapse. I returned to my childhood. The first time I understood that, inside that house, I was different. And not in a good way. I must have been about 7 years old. It was Enrique's birthday, my older brother. I remember the glow on his face when he received the red bicycle he'd wanted for months. The house was full of guests and expensive cake, live music. On my birthday, 3 months later, I received a pair of socks. No party, no guests. My mother used to say that sensitive children don't need so much. I was the sensitive one, the poetic one, the weak one. I've always been quieter. I like to draw, write, and keep to myself. While Enrique and Isabella vied for my parents' attention with good grades and rehearsed speeches about the family business, I preferred silence. My parents called it ingratitude. They said I was embarrassing, that I would be a burden. During dinner, when everyone was talking loudly about investments, real estate, and travel, I kept quiet. When I tried to speak, my father interrupted. "Daniel, go wash your hands. Children shouldn't butt into adult conversations." This was at 15. My mother was even more subtle. She ignored me gracefully. A kind of coldness that didn't require shouting to hurt. When I hurt my arm playing soccer at school, she took hours to pick me up from the hospital. She said she was too busy with a meeting. When I won a writing award, she didn't go to the event. She said words don't buy a future. Growing up in that house was like living on a stage where everyone had a clearly defined role, except me. Isabella was the perfect daughter, Henrique the successor, and I, the silence in the back of the room. At 18, I decided to leave, not out of rebellion, but for survival. I left with a backpack, an old cell phone, and the promise to never again put myself where I wasn't welcome. I worked as a waiter, a delivery driver, a bookstore clerk, and yet, each small step brought me more peace than any room in that soulless mansion. Years later, I tried one last approach. I called on Christmas just wanting to hear hi. Henrique answered. He said his family was busy and hung up. They never called back. I stopped trying. That constant absence, that emptiness I'd carried for years, now sat before me in the form of a manila envelope, my name handwritten on it, the same handwriting as my father's. The one I'd known since the cold notes he'd leave on the table when he'd go on a trip and forget to tell me. For a moment I hesitated. I felt afraid. Afraid that inside there was just another cruel joke, a reminder that I was never anything to them. But something in the lawyer's eyes made me understand there was more. My family watched me in silence, and for the first time, they were waiting to hear what I had to say. The lawyer's hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal on the envelope. It was clear this wasn't a routine occurrence, even for him. The room, previously noisy with whispers and expectant whispers, fell into absolute silence, a heavy, dense, almost hostile silence. I felt the eyes on me like invisible spears. My brothers were tense, not out of fear for me, but out of fear of losing something. And my mother, she just crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, as if bracing herself for yet another disappointment she didn't need to hide. The lawyer took a deep breath before beginning to read my father's letter. If this letter is being read, it's because I'm no longer here. And there are things I never had the courage to say in life, things I failed as a father to express, especially to you, Daniel. At that moment, I felt the world spin. Those lyrics, those words, they were his. The same man who had ignored me my entire life was now speaking directly to me, in front of everyone. My brothers looked away. My mother frowned as if she wasn't ready for this. I made a mistake. I made a lot of mistakes. Of all my children, you were the only one who never asked me for anything, the only one who never tried to prove who he was. And precisely because of that, you were the only one who made me think. The lawyer paused for a moment. His voice cracked, revealing that the reading was affecting him as well. He wiped his glasses, glanced at me briefly, and continued. I left Henrique and Isabella what they always sought, heritage. To you, I leave what no one else in this room knows, and I leave it out of merit, not obligation. The atmosphere grew tense. Henrique shifted in his chair, irritated. Isabella let out a mocking laugh, trying to hide her insecurity. My mother stared at the lawyer as if she could control him with her gaze, as she always tried to control everything. Then the lawyer pulled out a second envelope. This one was heavier. Inside were keys, documents, and an officially sealed folder. He handed it all to me with a respectful expression. Your father left you full control of the technology company he secretly founded 7 years ago, he said. It is registered in your name only, and today it is worth more than all the assets listed in the main will combined. The room exploded. Henrique stood up abruptly. That's absurd. That company doesn't even exist in his name. The lawyer maintained his posture. Exactly. It was in Daniel's name from the beginning. Your father made that decision after learning that you had been embezzling funds from the family holding company for years. And yes, he knew. Isabella's face went pale. She mumbled something I didn't understand. My mother, for the first time in years, was speechless. The lawyer looked at me firmly. Your father made it clear. You are the only one worthy of carrying on this legacy. He wrote that this company was the only project in which he felt free. just as, "You were the only son who never tried to be someone he wasn't." In that moment, the silence that had haunted me for years within that family became a shield. They didn't know what to say. For the first time, I wasn't the silence. I was the center of the table, but I didn't say anything. I just calmly put the papers away, stood up, and thanked him. My father denied me everything in life, and yet, he was the only one who gave me something in the end: justice. When I finally sat down across from the lawyer, the atmosphere was too tense for casual conversation. He seemed to be holding something heavy, as if he were carrying information that could change everything. This promised to be a decisive moment, and I felt my heart race, a mixture of anxiety and hope consuming me. After a few minutes of silence, he opened a folder and pulled out some documents, looking directly at me. "I know this isn't an easy situation," he began, "but there's something you need to know about the will. A secret no one expected." I raised my eyebrows, not understanding what he meant. Then he revealed, "The reason my name wasn't in the will had nothing to do with family rejection or resentment, but rather with a decision made years ago by a distant relative who had left a special clause hidden in the last will. This relative, a great uncle I barely knew, had set up a trust fund that would only be released if the heir demonstrated a change of character, clear proof of repentance for past actions. What's more, the trust fund would be managed by the lawyer himself, who would evaluate each case individually. Actually," the lawyer continued, "you weren't excluded by chance. Your name isn't on the main list because your great uncle wanted to test your karma. He believed people should face the consequences of their actions before receiving any reward." It was a shock to me. I remembered so many times when I had been unfair to my family, selfish and distant, always expecting to receive without giving anything in return. That clause in the will was a kind of test, a lesson left for those who had the courage to face their own mistakes. The lawyer explained that over the past few months, he had been observing my behavior, conversations, attitudes, and even statements from family members. And what he discovered was surprising. I was changing. The small steps I took to repair old conflicts, seek reconciliation, and help those I had hurt were being noticed. If you can prove that this transformation is genuine and permanent, you may be considered for a share of the fund, but that's entirely up to you, he concluded. I left that office with my mind racing. What seemed like an initial snub was actually a karmic challenge, a rare opportunity to make things right and, who knows, change my destiny. That revealed secret shook me deeply. It wasn't just about money or inheritance, but about justice and responsibility. I finally understood that to receive something of value, I first needed to become a better person. After that meeting with the lawyer, I began to realize that my life was undergoing a kind of silent evaluation, almost invisible, but very real. It was as if every action, word, and decision was carefully watched, as if fate were testing whether I had truly changed. I remembered moments from the past, how I'd acted with some family members, especially my younger sister, who had always been distant and even a bit rude. In those days, envy and pride prevented me from recognizing the value of people who truly cared about me. Now I felt an urgent need to fix that, to repair broken relationships. I began calling people I'd hurt, offering sincere apologies. With each call, I felt a weight lift from my chest. In fact, I was freeing myself from a burden I'd carried for years. I didn't expect everyone to accept it, but I was surprised by some responses, full of understanding and hope. At work, I tried to be more collaborative and less self-centered. I began to value my colleagues and recognize that success doesn't depend solely on me, but on everyone around me. Those small gestures began to create real change, both internally and externally. At the same time, the lawyer sent me periodic reports on the assessments he and other family members had made. Some friends and relatives were consulted to provide testimonials about my change. Hearing the positive reports was a shock. I, who had previously been seen as selfish, was now beginning to be recognized as someone who sought to improve and make amends. But karma didn't just manifest itself in small, everyday actions. On one occasion, I nearly had a serious accident while crossing a street in a hurry and distracted. At that moment, I thought that perhaps this was the universe's way of warning me to slow down and think before acting, not just in traffic, but in life in general. And so, little by little, I realized the power of karma, not as punishment, but as a fair system that gives, back in equal measure, what we give to the world. If before I only expected to receive, now I understood that I needed to give, to help, to be better. Furthermore, I noticed that family members who had previously ignored me were also going through their own trials. Some faced unexpected problems, financial hardships, and disagreements, as if karma were working on everyone, not just me. The lawyer explained that the fund was designed to benefit those who truly learned their lesson, who overcame their own shortcomings and built bridges instead of walls. It was an inheritance, yes, but above all a test of character. Every day, I felt closer to being approved. But I knew the journey was long and required sincerity and commitment. The secret of the will was more than a legal clause. It was an opportunity for real transformation, something few would have the courage to undertake. Thus, karma manifested itself in my life, showing me that there is no shortcut to justice, only truth, change, and constant effort. And deep down, I knew that the outcome of that story wouldn't just be about money, but about who I would truly become in the end. As my process of change and reconnection progressed, I began to realize I wasn't alone on this journey. The family, which had previously seemed distant and indifferent, began to show signs of unease and curiosity. The secret of the will, which until then had been a mystery to many, began to be discussed among close relatives. Some were visibly concerned. After all, this special fund could alter the distribution of the inheritance and, in some ways, threaten their financial prospects. Others, more skeptical, simply doubted that anyone could actually change enough to benefit. But regardless of their thoughts, no one could ignore the impact the revealed secret had on the family dynamic. My sister, with whom I had a difficult relationship, began to be more open and even shy. In an unexpected conversation, she told me she was surprised by my transformation and that perhaps finally, we could leave the hurts of the past behind. This deeply moved me, because it meant that karma not only affected my actions, but also influenced how others saw and treated me. On the other hand, some relatives expressed resentment. They saw my opportunity as a threat or a reason for further disputes and distrust. One uncle, for example, even confronted me, saying that the whole thing was a ploy by the lawyer to create conflict, and that I didn't deserve any of the inheritance. This kind of reaction, though painful, showed that karma also brought out people's true colors, both good and bad. At family gatherings, arguments became more frequent. The secrecy of the will became a main topic, generating heated debates and, at times, even fights. What was once a peaceful, albeit distant, coexistence became an emotional minefield, where every word carried weight and every look carried suspicion. But surprisingly, gestures of support also emerged. Some close relatives began to encourage me, offering help and words of comfort. They believed this was a real opportunity for redemption, not just for me, but for anyone who wanted to reconcile. The lawyer, for his part, continued his role as a discreet mediator, always reminding me that the fund's purpose was to promote justice through personal transformation. He advised me not to be shaken by negative comments and to remain steadfast in my commitment to change. The mood in the family shifted from passive waiting to active tension, an emotional game where karma was playing out a new script for all of us. I sensed that deep down, everyone was being tested in some way, facing their own challenges and trials. In the midst of the storm, I learned that the true inheritance lay not in money, but in the life lessons and bonds we could rebuild. And although I didn't yet know what the outcome would be, I was determined to face each obstacle with courage and humility. Time passed, and, The tension in the family reached ever-increasing levels. Everyone anxiously awaited the outcome of this delicate situation, and I felt the weight of every look and word as if it carried the weight of all our futures. The truth is, I myself didn't know exactly what to expect. Then came the decisive day, a final meeting with the lawyer to announce the results of the assessment of the special fund created by my great-uncle. I went to his office feeling a mix of nervousness and hope. I knew my life could change forever, but also that the transformation I experienced went beyond material value. The lawyer opened the conversation by acknowledging my efforts, but made it clear that the decision wasn't solely up to me. The assessment considered the real impact of my actions on my family and community, and the extent to which my change was genuine and lasting. After a long wait, he finally revealed the verdict. I would receive a significant portion of the fund, but not alone. There was a surprise. The clause stipulated that the remainder would be divided among other family members who also demonstrated change and repentance, including my sister and some cousins. This decision came as a shock to many, including me. Karmic justice didn't reward just one individual, but recognized the collective effort to transform hurts and rivalries into understanding and mutual support. It was a legacy that restored not only material values, but also human values. Some relatives were relieved, others dissatisfied, but there was no more room for dispute. The secret of the will had served its purpose, unearthing truths, testing consciences, and paving the way for reconciliation. From that moment on, the family began to rebuild, gradually rebuilding the bonds that had previously seemed irreparably broken. Meetings became more frequent and sincere, and resentment gave way to a new feeling of hope and unity. I personally experienced a profound transformation. Money, which once seemed central to everything, became merely a symbol of my journey of growth and learning. The real gain was realizing that karma works like a scale that balances justice and compassion. The secret revealed by the lawyer became a lesson for all of us, that it is possible to change, to forgive and be forgiven, and that every action has a consequence, for good or for bad. In the end, that seemed to exclude me was the greatest gift I could have received, an invitation to become a better person, and to contribute to a more just and harmonious future for the entire family. After everything I've experienced, one thing has become clear to me. Life is a cycle of actions and reactions, and karma is not just a spiritual idea, but a tangible reality that directly reflects our daily choices. I've been forced to understand that there's no point in expecting rewards if we're not willing to change and take responsibility for our mistakes. This journey of discovery and trials has taught me that true heritage lies not in material possessions, but in the human connections we build, in the opportunities to mend our ways and create a legacy of love, respect, and integrity. The secret kept in the will was, in fact, a life lesson, a way of showing me that karmic justice works fairly and relentlessly, but also mercifully. It gives the chance to start over, as long as there is sincerity and genuine effort. Today, I can look back and realize how much I've grown, not only as an heir to a legacy, but as a person, recognizing my mistakes, seeking forgiveness from those I've hurt, and opening my heart to change were the steps that brought me here. Family, once a source of pain and resentment, is now fertile ground for new beginnings. We learned together that despite conflict, forgiveness and understanding are essential for any relationship to thrive. And for those of you listening to this story, here's a piece of advice. Don't wait for karma to knock on your door to act. Transformation begins within each of us the moment we decide to be better, more honest, and empathetic. Never underestimate the power of your actions, for they shape your destiny and the impact you leave on the world. Sometimes the greatest trials come disguised as challenges, as in my case, a will that seemed to exclude me but actually invited me to be reborn. The revealed secret changed my life, and it can change yours too, if you are willing to see beyond appearances and embrace the process of growth. Ultimately, karma is more than a word. It's a continuous opportunity for evolution, a chance to do things differently and better every day.